Hi, so welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. This is our week 4 daily fantasy video. It's something we've been trying to launch and get into there. I don't know if you play daily fantasy. I do. I enjoy it. It's fun. Now, before I get into our video, here's what we're going to kind of do. At the very end of the video, I'll talk about last week, the lineup to put in, the results that we had. I'll give you this week's entry so you know who I'm kind of putting out there. Before I get into the video, though, and give you guys some guys that I think you should consider starting, I want to say that there's a key. You're in daily fantasy probably because you like to have fun, but you also want to win some money. And so to me, it's not just about having the right lineup. If you want to win money, here's key. It's choosing the right contest. There are so many different contests out there that you can choose, level of scoring, etc. You can be in some with 50 guys or thousands of guys in there. So you have to choose the right contest. Now, in my contest, I'm winning about 50% of the contests that I enter, I win money in. Now, what I do to win money is I avoid the expensive entries. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but hear me out on this one. I have to ask this question when I do daily fantasy. Am I here to compete, to have fun, or am I here to win money? Well, I'm there to win money. I enjoy having fun fantasy football, but for me, I do that in my fantasy football leagues. But when I do daily fantasy, I want to win some money. Now, here's why I avoid the expensive investments or the expensive leagues that you enter into or the expensive contests. The big spenders, the ones that put a lot of money into it, they're better players. They do their due diligence. And so what I do, instead of entering maybe 2 to 3 contests, I might enter up to 15 contests on a weekend, spend less money, and that might range from $2 out to $25 per contest. And what I have found is that my winning percent goes up significantly. Now, someone would say, well, wait a second, yeah, you can win money, but what's the most that you can win? You're capped. But here's the thing. Why most bettors, whether you're going to Vegas or whether you go to the casino or whatever, why they go broke, they get impatient, they get greedy. So if you take this approach and you separate your emotion, and if you're consistent over time, you will win a good amount of money. And that's kind of what I do. So I would encourage you. It's not just about the right lineup. You got to choose the right contest. And we can get more into that. If you have questions about what the right contest for you would look like, leave a question at the bottom. I'd be happy to answer, one of the other guys here on FFP. So let's get to our quarterbacks. Now, before I get into the quarterbacks, guys, I think you want to look at that are good deals. Here's the key to winning daily fantasy. Everybody knows to start the studs. You don't need me to tell you Christian McCaffrey is a good play or Pat Mahomes is a good quarterback. That's not how you win your money. It's about getting those guys into your lineup. In order to do that, you got to find some value plays. You got to find cap space. So that's what it's all about. Once again, I'm not going to waste time telling you about these guys. I hate it when you look at fantasy sites out there. CBS Sports will do it, ESPN, Yahoo, and they'll talk about great starts, and they list guys that every one of us knows a good start. You should start Derrick Henry. I'm not going to go there on that. Now, anything that we do when we approach this, there's a lot of different sites out there, daily fantasy. You got DraftKings, Yahoo, you got FanDuel, and their cap sizes vary. But here's what's consistent, the percentage. So when we share with you, we're not going to share with you the cost of the player, but the percentage it will cost you against your cap, because that percentage is pretty consistent no matter what site that you're using. Now, when I get to quarterbacks, to me, it's great to have a big-name quarterback that's going to rock it, but this is where I tend to find bargains. I feel like not only for daily fantasy, but in regular fantasy, this is where you can stream. It's easier to play matchups, so I look for quarterback deals quite often. Now, a guy that I was considering earlier this week that looked like he was tempting was Ryan Tannehill. But now you got A.J. Brown's out, Julio Jones is out, they're questionable, so he's a guy that even though it was a decent value in a good matchup, I'd probably fade on him and not use him. One guy out there that's not a bad play is Tyler Heineke. He's going to only be about 13% of your budget against a bad Atlanta defense. Now, this is a decent value, but I do think they're better plays. And here's the two guys that out there that I think are good plays for you. One's a little bit more money, but the one I think is a good deal. The good deal for me and what I rolled with this week is Sam Darnold. He is going to cost you only 12.5% against your cap against a Dallas defense that's allowing over 340 passing yards per game. And then you add the fact that Dak Prescott's ability to move that offense and score points, that means decent value for Sam Darnold, who, by the way, looks like a first-round pick. Now he's out of New York and playing for Carolina. The guy looks like he's the real deal, so I love him this week. I think he's a good value play. Another one that's a little bit more money, but I think is also a good play this week, is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers looks just fine. Forget week 1. He's back to his MVP form. Playing Pittsburgh, allowing the 10th most points to quarterbacks. Now, he's going to be 16% of your budget, so I went a little cheaper as Sam Darnold, but those are two guys out there that I think you definitely want to lean on strongly if you're looking for a quality play that's going to save you money in your cap space. Now, let's look at some running backs. Now, another helpful hint in daily fantasy is this. Always reinvest your money. What I mean by that is early in the week, you might set your money or set your lineup, let's say on a Wednesday, it may be perfect, great, but then on Friday or Saturday, injury report comes out, and all of a sudden a backup running back now becomes a starting back due to injuries. You've got to keep up on that because all of a sudden now you might get a deal. Chuba Hubbard, for example, a guy like that is a great deal, and you can take that extra money and you can reinvest it. And so you have to always make sure to play, check injury reports, update it. Don't just set your lineup Wednesday and leave it be. Always check it prior to kickoff. Now, I like to find deals also in the running back position, but this week I kind of went with what I call mid-range spending. I didn't go really high, I didn't go really cheap. Another thing I love to do when I approach this is that it's great to find what I would call a great deal. And maybe you can roll the dice on a player that's in what I would call a running back by committee. And every once in a while, you roll the dice on a guy like that and be huge. But I hate that. I want to know that my guy's going to be the bell cow. He's going to get the majority of the carries, and you're going to get the touches. No more frustrating for me when you have a back and a running back by committee who has a great game, but every time he gets down to the goal line, the backup guy comes in and gets a couple 1-yard plunges. So that's what I try to avoid. Now, what I did this week, if you're watching this video, it's probably too late for you on this one, but I did enter a contest for Thursday's play. If I look at all the running backs on Thursday night, I started James Robinson. James Robinson is only 9% of my budget. And we talked about in my start save videos. Week 1, I don't know why Coach Meyer didn't use him, but the guy is coming back in shape. He had a great rookie year, and he's looking really good. Moving forward, he's going to be a viable option, a solid running back too moving forward. And he had a great Thursday night game for me. And I also went Joe Mixon with only 14%. He had a great matchup. He did okay. I would like to see more from him there, but he did get injured in the second half. It kind of cooled some late yards that would have helped him, but he did find the end zone. He is currently leading the league in carries and yards going into this weekend. Another guy I mentioned earlier, Chuba Hubbard, 8.5% of your salary cap. Now, remember Mike Davis when he filled in for Christian McCaffrey? He had some really good numbers there, and he looked good last week. To me, that's a really good deal you got to use. Another guy that I like, as you're going to see in a little bit that I started, was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Only 9% of your salary cap. Yeah, he did fumble back-to-back weeks, but if you look at last week, the coach stuck with him. He ran very well. He looked strong. He was hitting holes. He looked like the guy that they drafted, what a lot of us have wanted to see the first year that he came into the league. Another one out there, now this one is obviously contingent on Dalvin Cook, but Alexander Mattison, 9.5% of your cap. That's pretty cheap. He did great last week. He's got another great matchup. Obviously, Dalvin Cook has to sit in order for that to happen. And right now, it's trending towards him playing in that game. But if he sits, you got to have Alexander Mattison. Once again, go back to what I said. That's where you got to shift your lineup. And if you plug him in right now, if Cook plays, pull him out, vice versa. Najee Harris. He's going to be about 10.5% of your cap. He's a decent play. He's not a great play due to the offense struggling at this point. But the nice thing about him is he's clearly the volume guy. He's safe and secure there. And so you don't have to worry he's going to get all the touches, and he's very talented. He's due for a breakout game one of these games. And then another one that you want to consider is David Montgomery, 10.5% of your salary cap, or cap spending, or whatever you want to call it. He's going to have a rebound week this week. Now, I would say this. I think he's a great play. I think he's going to rebound this week if Dalton or Foles starts. If Field starts, I would sit him because he looked brutal in week 1. So watch that. Those are guys that I think would be some quality plays for you, and that'll free up some cash so you can spend on some of the bigger guys, and that can really show up your lineup. Wide receivers this week. There's actually a lot of wide receivers out there that I feel pretty strong on. This is another one where I want a guy. I mean, there's a lot of great deals. Tampa Bay, for example, man, all 3 of those wide receivers could have huge weeks, but I just don't know from week to week who you can trust, so I just stay away from things like that. But there's some good guys out there. One guy you may want to go with, I'm not a huge fan of him. I'm not sure how he's going to do, but he's so cheap. That's Nick Westbrook. I won't even say the rest of his name. I'm sure I'll get it wrong. But the wide receiver for the Titans. Julio Jones is out. A.J. Brown is out. He looked good last week, and so he's going to get the start in this one, and he's going to be only 5% of your cap. That's a great play. Michael Pittman, about 8.5% of your cap. He's had 24 targets the last 2 games, 6'4", big target, solid receiver, very talented guy, so he's a nice play there. And then Allen Robinson. Now, this is contingent once again on Dalton or Foles starting. If they start, I would go with Allen Robinson. The guy is so talented. He's a wide receiver 1 type talent. But if Field starts in that one, then I would sit Allen Robinson. But if he plays, he's only going to be 8.5%. That's a good deal for a guy that could potentially get you, 10 catches for 100 yards. That's the type of talent they will feed him often. Kenny Golladay signed a big contract for the Giants, has disappointed, hasn't looked good, but he's only 8.5% of your cap. And Sterling Shepard and Slayton are out for this game. That means he should see a huge bump in his targets in this one, so he's a nice value play. And then I started in a league, and I love this guy. If you watch our videos, you know I got a man crush on him. But that's McLaurin, wide receiver for Washington. Scary Terry. I love this guy. He's going to be about 11% of your cap. He's going to have a rebound game versus Atlanta. And even last game, he didn't look great. He didn't have a lot of volume, but he had an okay day. He's just that talented. He's so good. I love Terry McLaurin in that one. And then here, to me, this is a great play, and you'd be foolish not to start this guy. That's DJ Moore. About 10% of your cap versus Dallas. That's a great play. He's a great wide receiver. He's looked good, former first-round pick. Got to put more in your lineup. He's going to save you a lot of money. He's going to have good production for you. Start him. So here we're at the tight ends. Now, this is where you may want to spend a little more money. I did. Because here's the thing. It's great to find that diamond in the rough. but you can't win money if you get a 0 in your lineup. You don't need to hit on every pick and be the top in every pick, but you got to get points out of every player, and you just can't afford a bust. And at tight end, man, it's hard to trust some of these tight ends. I'll give you a couple guys that are good deals if you desperately want to take a shot. There's Mike Gesicki. He's only 6.5% of your cap. Or Kyle Pitts, only 8% of your cap. Now, with Kyle there, he hasn't looked that great, but the guy's a stud. He's very talented, and you're playing it purely on upside. But for me this week, I actually went with Kelsey. I spent a little extra money there because I just didn't want to roll the dice like I had previously just said. You can't get a 0. You got to score at each one. You got to get some points. And so, to me, I spent a little bit more money in the tight ends. Now, that may change from week to week, but that's where I'm at this week. On to defenses. I don't like spending a lot of money on defense. I just really try to avoid it. I try to go very cheap. Now, the only time I'll spend a little extra money, for some reason, those bottom defenses are just brutal matchups. Like I had just said, you can't get a 0. But typically speaking, I think you can find some good quality defensive matchups that may not be spectacular, but they're going to save you a lot of money because you're going to win the money in your other positions there. And so here's a couple things right now. I like the Packers versus Pittsburgh. Only 5% of your cap. That's as low as it can go. And Pittsburgh has struggled, as you know. This could go either way, but I do like this one simply because it's so cheap. And then Detroit versus Chicago. Only 5% also versus your cap, and that goes back if Fields plays. If Fields ends up sitting in this one, then you may want to find another option out there. But if he plays, roll with the lines in this game. They're very cheap. And then there's the Titans versus the Jets. Only 6.5% of your cap. And Zach Wilson looks like, well, all Jets players look bad. So I think that's a defense. I don't like the Titans' defense as far as football goes, but as far as in this matchup based on cost, I think that's a decent play for you. Now I'm into the final part here. I'll talk about my last week's lineup, who I started, and who I'm going to start this week. Now, what I did is we're 3 weeks into it. This is going to be week 4. I don't do daily fantasy the first couple weeks in the season. Here's why I don't do that. Because one, it's money. I'm not here to have fun. I'm here to win money. And here's what you're being asked. You can always look at the year before. You can make guesses. There's some things we can probably pin down. But the first couple weeks in the NFL, especially fantasy-wise, are unpredictable. But after a couple weeks, you get a clear sense of trends in the NFL as far as fantasy, and you can begin to make safe investments. So I usually try to hold off a week or two, and then I ramp it up as we get farther and farther into it. So last week, I just went one lineup. This week, I'm going to put multiple lineups in. Last weekend, I went with these guys here. I rolled with, my quarterback was Daniel Jones. I went with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Najee Harris, Calvin Ridley, Cooper Kupp, DK Metcalf, Tyler Higbee, Saquon Barkley, and the Buffalo Bills defense. And in that one, I made a very small investment, but my investment returned to me. I was on 400%. That's what I got back in it once again. And I'll do that. Now, that 400% is not a ton of money because I'm making small investments, but I'll make multiple investments. And so for me, I always talk about being diversified if you're in the stock market. Well, here's what I do in games. I diversify in multiple games, and it's done really well for me. Now, this week, here's who I'm going to go with. Now, I'm going to do multiple laps, but here's one of the laps. I'll give you an example. I went Sam Darnold, who's about 12.5% of my cap. Then I went with James Robinson, 9%, Edwards-Helaire, 9%, McLaren, 11%, and then Moore, who, by the way, is a steal at 10%. I went with Keenan Allen. I have to watch that. He looks like he's going to play. He's questionable. He's 13.5% in that one. I went Travis Kelce. I want to spend more money for security in that one. Then I went 15.5% of my cap on Joe Mixon. That's the one where I had a little bit of regret. If I did it over, I'd probably put Shelba in for him and change that out. He did have a great matchup, unfortunately. Game flow, injury, he had just a so-so day. And then I went to Packers defense. So that's my lineup there. Next week, I'll share with you some other lineups, kind of dive in. But really, if you want some more help there, feel free to leave a question. I'd love to help you in this one. Hope you enjoy daily fantasy. It's a great way to do it, especially if your fantasy draft didn't go well and you're a few weeks in and you're 0-3 or 1-2 and maybe you lose another one, you're out of it. Hey, you still got daily fantasy. Once again, thank you for joining us on FFP. God bless and take care.